interviewed Dr. Cabrera and discovered that he was in possession of a number of stone tablets. They were black basaltic stone carved by striking a sharp instrument in a line, producing a white line on the black stones. He had 11,000 of these stones, and these stones clearly showed that a civilization came from the stars, and the source was indicated in one of the round stones. They came from the stars into a civilization in South America a long time ago, set up a colony, remained for a time, and interacted and lived with the people, the indigenous people in the area, and then for some reason abandoned the colony and took everybody back to their home planet, leaving only the remains of their culture behind, which in years, in a few hundred years, degenerated to nothing, and the evidence was lost except for what exists on the stones.
The Brotherhood of Atlantis. At a time when Atlantis reached its peak, ambitious scientists were determined to draw the last secrets from nature. They directed their research into the control of the gravitational net, just as today's government's secret research projects are involved in the control of all material structure. They studied electrogravitation, the compression of matter through sound and light. They built transmitters for the study of time through large crystals, using geomantic power places for energy field merging. Pyramidal structures were used to communicate with higher worlds. They used science to look for the original sound from which everything came. All this was part of the creation plan until this civilization had reached its peak with its exploration of the outer world. Then Atlantis entered a dangerous phase. Until this time, scientists and high priests had been united. Only a divinely guided human being, one who thinks with his heart and feels with his head, was entitled to divulge the secrets of creation. Such a scientist and high priest was guided by God and higher spiritual hierarchies, and was in harmony with its creations. He never threatened lives through any aspirations for power. But a new dark age appeared on the earth. There were students of masters who had not yet completed their initiation, and who experimented and searched for the original sound, Urton, without the permission of the sacred council of the seven wise beings. With this, the destruction of Atlantis was sealed. Separate thinking without divine guidance, without the intuition from the heart, used for the sake of personal will and power, alienated science and the priesthood. A preordained catastrophe occurred. The Council of the Seven Wise Beings, who at that time resided physically on the earth, withdrew. The Council warned the God-chosen people and sent them to different continents in order to safeguard humanity's descendants. Everybody knows the Atlantis legend. I don't have to repeat it here. About Atlantis, you'll find an abundance of literature, about 10,000 volumes. I would say that every few years, some clever person comes along and proves that Atlantis was either in the Azores, or near Bimini, or in the Mediterranean, the island of Santorini, and so on. There are plenty of Atlantis theories and Atlantis locations, but nothing until today that can be tangibly proven. Now you ask, if Atlantis as a culture reached round the world, specialists, I mean archaeologists, would say no. So you would find their argument is not convincing. You would say that any technologically advanced culture needs some kind of metal. They would work with and melt this metal. And if Atlantis had a worldwide reaching culture, then we should have found used or empty mines of some kind of minerals. And none has emerged so far. And that is why specialists say Atlantis could not have had a worldwide culture. The more perfect a culture, the less it would need these kinds of minerals and raw materials as we have them today. One could even say a perfect culture would maybe destroy itself from the outside in a perfect manner, and nothing would be left behind. So we're still up in the air. I would say Atlantis. Yes, Atlantis did exist. Literally, you can prove it quite clearly, but objectively with a solid object in your hand, one is uncertain, unfortunately. After the catastrophe, nations were dispersed. Knowledge, languages, and traditions were divided. Everything progressed in polarity and division. The Dark Age also saw the beginning of the cycle of descent into an ever-increasing division of individuality and of separateness. For the first time, the Dark Brotherhood made its appearance. Until then, all knowledge had been common to all. There had been no knowledgeable elite, neither was the mass of people kept ignorant. There were no rulers, no people being ruled, and no governments or bureaucracies. Most spiritual guides of the outer world, along with the worldly leaders, fell under the influence of polarity. The now self-appointed leaders had their own city-states, and because of the knowledge they kept to themselves, they were worshipped more and more, and were paid duties. The Brotherhood of Atlantis ensured that knowledge was divided into two parts. On the one hand, the exoteric knowledge accessible to all. On the other hand, the esoteric secrets only accessible to the initiated members of the Brotherhood. The saying, knowledge is power, dates from that time. When knowledge was withheld from the ordinary people, the spiritual decline yielded darkness. Power struggles and dissension arose among the leaders of the Brotherhood, who, afraid of losing their power, used science to develop weapons, because verbal agreement was no longer possible. At first, weapons were developed for defense and later used for aggression. Governments began to spy on each other, and the first secret service agencies were founded to forestall opponents. This tradition is alive today. The secret services not only serve government leaders, but also the powers of corruption. Thus Atlantis, after many declining cycles, finally reached its downfall. At the peak of one of these quarrels for absolute power, the ultimate weapon, a gravitation bomb, was produced in order to destroy the cities of the now fighting elite priests. The Indian national epic, the Mahabharata, is widely known. It tells of wars. For example, in the 5th book of the Mahabharata, it tells of a god who was called Gurkha. And this Gurkha has thrown a single lightning bolt onto the threesome city. Then it was described in detail how the elephants stumbled around in circles, their skin hanging off them. They roared, people screamed, birds fell out of the sky, warriors tore off their armor and jumped into the water. It is clearly said that everything was surrounded by a deadly breeze, and even the unborn children in the womb died. And this is a case out of Indian mythology where definitely a bomb had been dropped, because all the symptoms have been described so precisely. Up to the Great Blow, several large cities ruled. One of them was Urd on the plain of the Taklamakan Desert between Tibet and China. Poseidon, the metropolis, now lie on the bottom of the ocean. The golden cities on the banks of Lake Titicaca, the Empire of Tula in the far north, as well as many other mysterious and lost cities, which we now know from our legends date from this time. Within 30,000 years, these cities